All right, this is chapter 13, text 30, and I'm going to read the Sanskrit and the synonyms and the translation, and you can read the paragraph purport. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Prakrityaiva chakarmani kriyamanani sarvasha ya pasyanti tadatmanam akartaram sapashite. Synonyms: prakritya, by material nature; eva, certainly; cha, also; karmani, activities; kriyamanani, being performed; sarvasha, in all respects; ya, anyone who; pasyati, sees; tata, also; atmanam, himself; akartam, the non-doer; sa, he; pasyati, sees perfectly. Translation: one who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this body is made by material nature under the direction of the super soul, and whatever activities are going on in respect to one's body are not his doing. Whatever one is supposed to do, either for happiness or for distress, one is forced to do because of the bodily constitution. The self, however, is outside all these bodily activities. This body is given according to one's past desires to fulfill desires. One is given the body with which he acts accordingly. Practically speaking, the body is a machine designed by the Supreme Lord to fulfill desires. Because desires, one is put into difficult circumstances to suffer or to enjoy. The transcendental vision of the living entity, when developed, makes one separate from bodily activities. One who has such a vision as an actual seer.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. If you study like the great saints that in the past, like for example, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was God, so he's pretty advanced, but he didn't even realize he was doing stuff, like he would do his normal daily activities, like eating and sleeping and do, things like that. But he wouldn't, he was like completely detached from it, because he knows that he's not the body. Of course, in his case, his body was completely spiritual, but that's a different story. He was just playing the part of a human being. Text 31. Maybe we'll be able to get through this. I don't know. We're kind of at the end of the chapter. That would be awesome. Yada bhuta pratagbavan ekastam anupasite tataiva chavistaram brahma sampadyate tada.
Is there for this text, how there's do you say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya? Is there also like a kind of mantra, like a way to say this, like a mantra song, or do you just
to chant a verse to a melody? You mean
verse?
Yeah, it depends on the meter. I chant all day long. I don't know. Let's see. It depends on the meter of the particular verse. Yada bhuta pratagbavam ekastam anupasite tataiva chavistaram brahma sampadyate tada. It could go like that. But anyway.
Is the chanting of the verses always just different? Depending on
sometimes, sometimes people do different melodies, and sometimes the meter in the verse, sometimes you get a long verse, or sometimes it's shorter, and each part, like, you only have 4 words in each section of this verse, but only a certain amount of syllables. So you have to, like, when you're singing something, you have to have a rhyme or a meter that ends on a particular thing if you're going to sing a tune, so that's why I kind of like personally, I like to listen to music and then chant the Hare Krishna mantra in the background because, I like to listen to certain instrumental music, rock and roll, but I don't listen to any kind of vocals. I like instrumental music. Pretty much exclusively, I listen to guitar music. My favorite guitarist is Joe Satriani. I don't know if you heard of him, but
Yeah,
you have heard of him?
I think so. He's gosh, what was he in?
Oh, he was in Chickenfoot. He was in Dream Theater. He wasn't really in anything. He was a solo artist. He's like the guru of all the guitarists. He taught Steve Vai how to play, like all these different guitar gods. He's the guitar gods of all gods. But he's going to be here and finally it's going to tour. He put out 2 albums since he's about my age. He's maybe a year younger than I am, but he's put out a couple of albums since the pandemic, and I can't wait to see him. But what I do is I chant the mantra, because most rock and roll's in 4/4 time. And so the verse, the Hare Krishna mantra fits perfectly. So I'll either chant it out loud while I'm driving or else in my mind, while I'm listening to headphones or whatever, because it fits perfectly in there. And there's no hard and fast rules for chanting Hare Krishna, you can chant it to a melody. You can even jokingly, it has an effect. Even if you do it like kind of like offhandedly. Like there's a story about one guy who was like a Brahmana in the beginning of his life, and then he kind of got deviated. He got attracted to a prostitute, and he lived with her and committed all kinds of crimes. And then at the end of his life, he named his boy, he was like 80 something years old. He named his boy Narayan. And, when the Yamadutas were coming to get him, those are like the guys that drag you to hell.
Yeah.
And so when they were coming to get him, he called out to his boy, Narayan. And because of that, the Vishnu Dutas came and say, "What are you doing? You can't take this guy. He's called out the name of the Lord." It's so powerful. But anyway, let's finish this verse here. The bottom line is there's no hard and fast rules for chanting Hare Krishna. It could be done at any time or circumstance in any place, with or without, loudly or in your mind or, whatever. Synonyms: yada, when, bhuta, of living entities, pritak bhavam, separated identities, ekashtam, situated in one, anupasyati, one tries to see through authority, tata eva, thereafter, cha, also, vishtaram, the expansion, brahma, the absolute, samapadyate, he attains tada at that time. Translation: when a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to material bodies and he sees how beings are expanded everywhere, he attains to the Brahman conception. Go ahead.
All right. When one man sees the various bodies of living entities arise due to the different desires of the individual soul and do not actually belong to the soul itself, one actually sees in the material conception of life, we find someone a demigod, someone a human being, a dog, a cat, etc. This is material vision, not actual vision. This material differentiation is due to a material conception of life. After the destruction of the material body, the spirit soul is one. The spirit soul, due to contact with material nature, gets different types of bodies. When one can see this, he attains spiritual vision, thus being free from differentiations like man, animal, big, low, etc. One becomes purified in his consciousness and able to develop Krishna consciousness and his spiritual identity. He then sees things will be explained in the next verse. How he then see things will be explained next verse.
Yeah. Yeah, this kind of vision is really needed, nowadays. Everybody's seeing like different material bodies. So this person's black, this person's a woman, this person's a man, this person's a Muslim or whatever, but it's all material.
Mm.
You might be I was just there's a thing in the Bhagavatam where is if you meditate on something, even if it's your enemy, then you become like that thing that you're meditating on. So if you hate somebody, then you become that person in your next life. It's amazing.
Interesting. Mm.
So text 32, Anaditvan Nugrunatvat Paramatmayam Avayaya Sarirasto Pikonteya Na Karoti Na Lipyate. Synonyms. Anadidvat, due to eternity. Nirgunatvat, due to being transcendental. Parama, beyond material nature. Atma, spirit. I am this. Avyaya, inexhaustible. Sharirasta, dwelling in the body. Api, though Konteya was son of Kunti. Na karoti, never does anything. Na lipite, nor is he entangled. Translation, those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjuna, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. Good.
A living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal, thus he cannot be destroyed. By nature, he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him.
So you're kind of a musician, aren't you?
Not so much anymore.
But you used to play guitar. Do you play guitar?
Not so much.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I play guitar. I was just wondering why you were asking about the meter of the verse, and I heard you were in a musical. Obviously you had to sing in that, right?
A little bit of backup, yeah.
Okay. Text 33. Yata sarvagatam shokshmyad akshanam lopalipite sarvatra vastito dehe tatatma lopalipite. Synonyms. Yata, as sarvagatam, all pervading. Shokshmyat, due to being subtle. Akasham, the sky. Na, never. Upalipite, mixes. Sarvatra, everywhere. Avastita, situated. Dehe, in the body. Tata, so. Atma, the self. Na, never. Upalipite, mixes. Translation. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all pervading. Similarly, the soul, situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Good.
The air enters into water, mud, stool, and whatever else is there, still does not mix with anything. Similarly, the living entity, even though situated in varieties of bodies, is aloof from them due to his subtle nature. Therefore, it is impossible to see with the material eyes how the living entity is in contact with this body and how he is out of it after the destruction of the body. No one in science can ascertain this.
Yeah, Prabhupada, one time he was at MIT, you ever heard of Massachusetts Institute of Technology?
Yep, been up there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, he was giving like a presentation to the students there, and he asked the students, hey, is there any like class or section of this university that deals with the soul?
Mhm.
They just like looked at him with this blank stare on their face, because there isn't. Even in all of these different educational systems, there is nothing that deals with the science of the self or the science of the soul, which Bhagavad-gītā puts very clearly into perspective. Like in my talk about the mind or the chemical reactions, they try to reduce everything to like you know, psychology or
Psychology, yeah. I was gonna say.
yeah, or even chemical reactions in the brain, you know,
Mhm.
and they try to reduce everything down to that, but it really kind of like misses the whole point of who we are, you know. You know, the
Mhm.
scientists say we're just a bunch of random combination of chemicals. We're just a bunch of atoms, you know, running laps around themselves, and they're just a bunch of beeping atoms. You know, that's life. Sorry,
Mhm.
which is really depressing, you know. What about all the emotions and the interactions with humans and with God himself, you know? How could that be just a chemical reaction, you know?
Mhm.
It really does demean that material. It's called materialistic reductionism. The whole idea that you can reduce life and the origin of the universe down to, you know, a combination of matter. You know, life comes from life. We see
Mhm.
that every day, but it never comes from matter. And so that is one of the biggest hoaxes, I think, ever in the history of mankind. Prabhupada was very strong about that, you know. Uh, so, you know, that's one of my pet peeves, because my father was kind of like a physicist, and we used to have arguments all the time. But I stopped arguing with him
Oh,
because
wow.
you can't argue with people that don't believe in God, you know.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't really, you know. I bought him a T-shirt once that said, you know, like on the Bart Simpson thing, he's writing on a chalkboard at the beginning of this cartoon. He
Mhm.
says, "Do this. I'm going to do this." You know, I
Right.
said, "I will not argue. I will not argue." I put that on a black T-shirt and gave it to him. He loved that shirt. He wore it out.
That's an interesting that he's a physicist. That's very interesting.
Yeah, well, in the 1960s, he was like he was uh, he was actually involved in atomic energy. You know,
Wow.
because that was a big thing back then. He
Gosh.
actually there was a high school in the town they was in. This they built this whole town about this study of what was the reaction of radiation to a human being. It was called the
Mhm.
Standard, and actually my middle name was supposed to be Standard, Scott Standard Manley, because you know how much radiation can a human being uh, withstand, you know, without getting sick or
Wow.
something like that. And actually, the logo for the high school in that town was an atomic mushroom cloud.
Oh, that's insane.
I know, isn't it?
What high school was it? Where was this?
It was somewhere in Colorado, I believe.
Oh, that's
He was like,
crazy.
you know, as a physicist. But you know, and after the 60s, yeah, after you know, like the Cold War, or you know, in the
Yeah.
70s, nobody was interested in physics anymore, so he became an astronomer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he lived out his like from the 70s through, you know, till he retired recently. I think he was like forced out because he was so old. He couldn't even hear the students anymore. He loved working, you know, but he'd
Oh,
have to like
wow.
go down the aisle and try to hear somebody from, you know, speaking.
Oh,
But now he can't even walk, you know, because he's like 93 years old.
oh my goodness.
Yeah, he's old.
Wow. He must have some really interesting stories.
Yeah, he does. Unfortunately, he's as stubborn as a mule.
Mm.
And you know, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So I don't talk to him about any kind of spirituality anymore. In fact, I don't talk to him about much anything actually, period. But he was a good guy. I mean, he was a liberal type of, you know, as far as his politics go. He used to, in the late 60s, he'd take me out to anti-war demonstrations against
Oh,
Vietnam
wow.
when I
Mm.
was a teenager, candlelight vigils and stuff like that.
Mm.
And so, but anyway, he's an interesting personality, but unfortunately, he's, you know, my spiritual master met him, and he his first comment was Maya Prakriti Gyan. He says that is the aspect of a certain type of person, you know, that their intelligence is covered over by Maya. You know, they might be very intelligent, but their intelligence is covered by their, you know, their kind of like rebellious nature, you know. That's
Mm.
why they make up all this bullshit about, you know, how life comes from matter and stuff like that. You know, otherwise, why would you even actually think about it, you know? Like atheists, they sit around and talk about God all day long, and they write books about it and talk with other people who don't believe in God. If something doesn't exist, why the hell talk about it, you know?
Well, when I tell atheists that their religion is atheism, they get flippant. I'm like, well, and just like you said it, yeah, well, you're so obsessed and learned about proving it wrong, therefore it's become like a religious pursuit.
Well, it's based on belief. It's not based on
It's
any
based
kind of,
on belief, right? It's like if you believe there isn't something so strongly, that makes it a religion. Whether you believe it does or does not exist, if you believe one thing to the exclusion of the other, then therefore you're a believer. Therefore, that makes you religious.
yeah, my spiritual master said, my father got in an argument with my spiritual master as soon as he met him. He said, he talked about the absolute truth. The absolute truth is actually a person, ultimately, you know. The absolute truth is not a concept. It's not a dogma. The absolute truth is a dynamic personality. And he said, the only absolute truth is that there is no absolute truth, which is kind of an absolute statement in itself, you know.
Yes, very much so.
But, you know, I sent him this meme, this meme here. I don't know if you can see that.
It's hard
Let me
to
read it to you, though.
What did it say?
It says, to be an atheist, you know, he's a self-professed atheist. He used to call himself an agnostic, but now he's like a total atheist. He says, to be an atheist, you'd have to believe nothing produced everything, non-life produced life, randomness produced precision, chaos produced order. I simply do not have that much faith. And I said, you have more faith than I do. It is a kind of faith. It is kind of a religion, like you said.
Man,
really
that's
is.
awesome. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Because my dad's the same way. He's an atheist. I don't really talk to him. But it's like, I mean, he's got his reasons like everybody else, I suppose. But it's just, I just can't stand getting into these like Facebook arguments.
Yeah. You know, there's a reason why there's a saying that you can't argue with anybody about two things: politics or
Religion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, because it's too close to the bone. You know, it's like
Yeah.
people become merged with that identity, and it's very difficult to you know, to reason with somebody like that when it's not
Well,
really even based on anything.
you know, the funny thing too is like with religions, and even though, and this is kind of relevant to our discussion that we're having, where they're saying it's not the material, you know, like you're saying, like the races don't matter, even the religions don't matter, because, you know, in essence, even when I, you know, talk with a Jehovah's Witness, it's like they don't believe that something just came out of, they don't believe in Big Bang. They believe that there was consciousness and design and creation, just as God created, and it states it in the Bible, and this is, you know, their belief. So
Yeah,
it's too different than what in that sense. It, you know, it's, even if they, you know, call God by a different name, it still is a belief that like there's a creator, that sort of
yeah.
idea.
Well, that's not even really God's real, you know, he doesn't even have anything to do with his creation. I mean, he does create, everything's coming from him, but that's just a secondary thing that he does just because the living entities are rebellious and they needed some like little playground of their own to enjoy separately from him. The majority of living entities live in the spiritual world with him. But my father used to have on his co-worker, he used to live in the physics department. His co-worker had a bumper sticker on the door. It said, "The Big Bang is an exploding myth." And you know, but anyway, yeah, you really can't talk to certain people, especially after a certain age. You know, he's 90 years old, you know, so
Oh
he's
yeah,
not gonna listen to anything
he's
after
fixed.
that.
Yeah, he's fixed. That's it.
Yeah, he's gonna. He took some prasadam, you know, so maybe that'll help. Or, you know, I'm hoping that maybe I'll become a pure devotee, because if you become a pure devotee, like generations in your family will be delivered. Do you know that? I'm just reading about that now, because Prahlad Maharaj, a little boy that was the son of Hiranyakashipu, you know, Nrsingadev killed him, and Prahlad begged Nrsingadev to forgive him, and said, and so he actually said, don't worry about it. 7 generations forward and backward from your family will be delivered just because of you. So we got 10 minutes left here.
Okay.
Put it on the timer. Actually, it shows up here, but we should probably try to keep going here a little bit.
Okay.
Text 34.
Yeah.
Yata prakashayati eka kritsnam lokam imam bravi chetram chetri tata kritsnam prakasyati bharata. Prakasayati bharata. Synonyms: yata, as, prakashayati, illuminates, eka, one, kritsnam, the whole, lokam, universe, imam, this, ravi, sun, kshetram, this body, chetri, the soul, tata, similarly, kritsnam, all, prakashayati, illuminates Bharat, O son of Bharat. Translation: O son of Bharat, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity with one within the body illuminate the entire body by consciousness. This is a little bit longer.
Yes, there are various theories regarding consciousness. Here in Bhagavad-gītā, the example of the sun and the sunshine is given. As the sun is situated in one place but is illuminating the whole universe, so a small particle of spirit soul, although situated in the heart of this body, is illuminating the whole body by consciousness. The consciousness is the proof of the presence of the soul, as sunshine or light is the proof of the presence of the sun. When the soul is present in the body, there is consciousness all over the body. As soon as the soul has passed from the body, there is no more consciousness. This can be easily understood by any intelligent man. Therefore, consciousness is not a product of the combination of matter. It is the symptom of the living entity. Yeah, the consciousness of the living entity. Although qualitatively, one with the supreme consciousness is not supreme, because the consciousness of one particular body does not share that of another body, but the super soul, which is situated in all bodies as the friend of the individual soul, is conscious of all bodies. That is the difference between supreme consciousness and individual consciousness. That's a lot.
Doesn't that blow your mind how one person, Krishna, can be aware of everybody, everybody in the entire universe, all of the universe, there's millions of universes, trillions of living entities, what they're doing, what they're feeling, what they're thinking in the past, present, and the future at the same time. I mean, and it's true, because you can understand how Krishna can be aware of what we're doing in our own consciousness, just by our own realization. There's only one more verse after this, then we're done.
Okay.
Text 35. Chetra chaitanyard evam antaram jnana chakshusha bhukta prakriti moksham cha yevadur yanti te param. Synonyms: Chetra, of the body, Chetra Junayo, of the proprietor of the body, evam, thus, antaram, the difference, gan, chakshush, by the vision of knowledge, bhuta, of the living entity, prakriti, from material nature, moksham, the liberation, cha, also, yea, those who vidu, know, yanti, approach, te, they, param, the supreme. Translation: those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature to attain the supreme goal. And we'll take turns reading the paragraphs.
Okay.
About 6 minutes left.
The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the super soul. One should recognize the process of liberation as described in verses 8 through 12. Then one can go on to the supreme destination.
A faithful person should at first have some good association to hear of God and gradually become enlightened. If one accepts a spiritual master, one can learn to distinguish between matter and spirit, and that becomes a stepping stone for further spiritual realization. The spiritual master, by various instructions, teaches his students to get free from the material concept of life. For instance, in Bhagavad-gītā, we find Krishna instructing Arjuna to free him from materialistic considerations.
One can understand that this body is matter. It can be analyzed with its 24 elements. The body is the gross manifestation, and the subtle manifestation is the mind and psychological effects. And the symptoms of life are the interactions of these features. But over and above this, there is the soul, and there is also the super soul. The soul and the super soul are two. This material world is working by the conjunction of the soul and the 24 material elements. One who can see the constitution of the whole material manifestation as this combination of the soul and material elements can also see the situation of the supreme soul becomes eligible for transfer to the spiritual world. These things are meant for contemplation and for realization, and one should have a complete understanding of this chapter with the help of this spiritual master.
Yeah, it's actually said that you should cultivate knowledge of nescience and transcendence at the same time. In other words, you have to separate what is material from what is spiritual. Actually, ultimately, everything is spiritual. But because we have material considerations, because we're conditioned, we end up confusing things. Like we mistake something that's real for something that's actually not real, like a rope for a snake or something like that, you know. Just like Arjuna was mistaking his duty. He didn't want to kill his grandfather and his martial arts teacher, and he was attached to them, and he thought he shouldn't do that. But Krishna told him something different. You know, he said, just fight for the sake of fighting. You have to do your duty because you're a Kshatriya, and also because I want this war. You know, he wanted to kill all the demons, and so he gathers them all up and he destroys them all. That's how he does things. You know, he says that in the Gita. He says, "Yada yada dharmasya bhavani bhavita bharata vitanama dharmasya tadatmanam shujamyaham." Whenever and wherever there's a decline in religious principles and a rise of irreligion, at that time I advent myself, millennium after millennium. So he kills all the non-devotees and he protects the devotees. Of course, Lord Chaitanya, in his incarnation, he didn't kill anybody. He actually just killed their demonic mentality. And that's what's nice about Lord Chaitanya's movement, you know.
What is a demonic mentality? What is that considered to be?
That's in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. I mean, if somebody who's like really materialistic, let me see here. I can just read you a one quick verse here. We got 2 minutes left. But the demonic mentality, he thinks that there's no one in charge, first of all. And they think that sex life is the cause of everything, and that nobody's in charge. And this is the divine and demonic natures of chapter 16.
Okay.
And this is Krishna is telling Arjuna, you know, there's two kinds of natures, but you don't have to worry, Arjuna, you're of a divine nature. And he first of all explains the divine nature, you know, fearlessness, purification of existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, blah, blah, blah. And then he says the demonic nature, pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. These qualities belong to demonic nature. And, you know, pretty much Donald Trump, you know, in a nutshell.
Pretty much Allegheny County government.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is like what a demonic person thinks. So much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. He is my enemy, and I have killed him, and my other enemies will also be killed. I'm the Lord of everything. I'm the enjoyer. I'm perfect, powerful, and happy. I'm the richest man, surrounded by aristocratic relatives. There's none so powerful and happy as I am. I shall perform sacrifice. I shall give some charity, and thus I shall rejoice. And it's this way that such persons are deluded by ignorance.
I need to get more into that, because man, everything in this world just operates, seems like, under the demonic influence.
Yeah, I mean, this is the age of Kali, so
Kali Yuga,
the
yeah.
Kali Yuga means like the divine qualities of charity, austerity, mercy, and tolerance are being replaced, are being completely cut out.